Before we begin, if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. I'd love to know how far this video has traveled, so drop a comment below telling me which country you are watching from. Now, let's get to the story. It was a Friday night I had been waiting for. At 17, after months of begging, my parents finally agreed to let me stay home alone while they visited my grandmother for the weekend. I watched their car tail lights fade down the street with a mixture of thrill and nervousness. As soon as the heavy front door thudded shut, the silence of the house hit me. It wasn't a peaceful quiet. It was a vast, empty pressure. Every usual creak of the floorboards sounded amplified, like the house was stretching around my newfound solitude. For the first few hours, I rode the high of freedom. I ordered an expensive pizza, drank forbidden energy drinks, and blasted video games on the big screen without headphones. It felt great to be king of the castle. Around 10 o'clock, I decided to take a long, hot shower, another luxury usually cut short by my family. I spent 20 minutes under the spray, letting the steam fill the bathroom until the mirror was completely fogged. It was meditative, peaceful, but when I finally shut the water off, the silence that rushed back and felt heavier than before. I had left the TV on downstairs for background noise, but now I couldn't hear it. I dried off quickly, a vague unease settling in my stomach. When I opened the bathroom door, the cooler hallway air hit me, and I shivered. The house felt different, though I couldn't explain why. I went downstairs, my bare feet silent on the carpet. The living room TV was displaying the black "Are you still watching?" screen. Mystery solved. I laughed at my own jumpiness, grabbed a slice of cold pizza, and sat on the couch to resume my game. That's when I heard it for the first time. It was incredibly faint, like a soft exhalation right behind my left ear. I froze, pizza halfway to my mouth. I spun around, my heart hammering against my ribs. The kitchen behind the couch was dark and empty. I strained my ears, but heard only the hum of the refrigerator. I told myself it was the old house settling, or the wind, or my overactive imagination fueled by being alone. I tried to focus back on the screen, but my body remained rigid. 10 minutes passed. I was just starting to relax, convincing myself I was being ridiculous, when it happened again. This time, there was no mistaking it. It was slow, measured breathing, and it was directly behind the couch. The sound paralyzed me with a primal fear that bypassed all rational thought. For seconds, it felt like hours. I couldn't move. When I finally whipped my head around, neck creaking with tension, there was nothing there but the wall and a bookshelf. The breathing stopped the instant I moved. The subsequent silence felt expectant, heavy. I couldn't just sit there waiting for it to happen again. I needed to prove to myself I was alone. I went to the kitchen and grabbed the largest knife from a block. It felt heavy and foreign in my sweating palm. I methodically turned on every light on the first floor, checking closets, the pantry, behind curtains. Nothing. I moved upstairs, clutching the knife. My own footsteps sounded like thunder. I checked every bedroom, under beds, inside wardrobes. The house was empty. There was no sign of forced entry. Confused and still terrified, I returned to the kitchen. If nobody was there, I had to be losing my mind. I sat at the table and Googled house noises that sound like breathing. The results were comforting. Articles about HVAC systems, settling pipes, and wind drafts creating eerie sounds. I felt a wave of pathetic relief. Of course, it was an old house. I'd just never been alone enough to notice its groans before. I made a cup of coffee to calm my nerves, feeling foolish for carrying a kitchen knife around like a character in a bad horror movie. Feeling steadier, I went back to the living room, determined to enjoy my night. I settled onto the couch and put on a comedy special, laughing loudly to fill the silence. I was actually starting to enjoy myself again when, without warning, every light in the house died. The TV cut out mid-joke, plunging the room into absolute darkness save for a sliver of moonlight. My heart seized. Power outages happened, sure, but the timing felt malicious. In the sudden, suffocating silence that followed the loss of power, I heard again, the breathing. But this time it wasn't behind the couch. It was right next to me, so close I could feel the slight movement of air against my cheek. I lunged for my phone on the coffee table, knocking over my mug, fumbling desperately until I turned on the flashlight. I swung the beam wildly around the room. I was completely alone. But even with the light on, staring at empty air, the slow, steady breathing continued for several agonizing seconds before fading away. Panic threatened to overwhelm me, but I clung to the last shred of rationality I had. I needed the lights back on. The breaker box was in the basement. The thought of going down into that concrete darkness made me want to vomit, but staying upstairs waiting for sound to return was worse. Using my phone as a meager torch, I navigated to the basement door and descended the creaking wooden stairs. The air below was cold and smelled of damp earth. I reached the breaker panel in the far corner and threw open the metal door. My heart sank. None of the breakers were tripped. Everything looked normal. I was staring at the panel in confusion when I heard it. Distinct, heavy footsteps walking across the kitchen floor directly above my head. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. Someone was in the house. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't pipes. The footsteps moved with deliberate, casual pace from the kitchen toward the living room. I instinctively killed my phone light, plunging myself into total darkness, pressing my back against a cold concrete wall. I prayed they wouldn't come down here. Then, the basement door at the top of the stairs creaked open. "I know you're down there," a male voice called out. It was calm, almost friendly, which made it infinitely more terrifying. "You can't hide forever. I've been waiting a long time for you to be alone." I didn't breathe. I didn't move. The sound of a boot hitting the first wooden step echoed like a gunshot. Then came the click of a heavy-duty flashlight, its powerful beam slicing through the basement darkness like a searchlight. He was coming down. I abandoned my spot by the wall and scrambled deeper into the basement, diving behind a stack of old moving boxes near my dad's workbench. I pressed myself flat against the dusty floor. The intruder reached the bottom of the stairs. I could hear his heavy breathing now. The same sound I'd heard upstairs, but real, visceral. He began a methodical sweep of the room, his light illuminating patches of junk and shadows. "This is fun," he chuckled, his voice echoing slightly, "like hide and seek. But you know there's only one way out of here, kid." The flashlight beam swept closer to my hiding spot. I knew if I stayed there, I was dead. The basement stairs were about 20 feet away. I had to time it perfectly. As his beam swept toward the far corner near the water heater, I made my move. I didn't care about being quiet anymore. I scrambled up from behind the boxes and bolted toward the stairs. I heard him shout in surprise behind me, followed by the sounds of him giving chase, knocking things over in the dark. I hit the stairs just as his flashlight beam caught me, blinding me for a second, but I knew the way. I took the steps two at a time, adrenaline fueling me past the terror. I burst through the doorway into the kitchen and slammed the door behind me, knowing it wouldn't hold him for more than a second. I didn't run for the front door. It was too far. Instead, I lunged to the back patio door. My hands were shaking so violently I could barely work the lock. Behind me, I heard him crash against the basement door, throwing it open. The lock clicked free, and I threw myself out into the night air, the cold hitting my sweating face like a slap. I was barefoot, slipping on the dew-soaked grass as I sprinted across the backyard. I heard the back door slam open against the house siding. He was right behind me. I ran straight for the 6-foot wooden privacy fence at the back of our property. It was my only chance. I slammed into the wood, gasping for air, my lungs burning. I reached up, grabbing the top planks, splinters digging into my palms. I tried to haul myself up, but my legs were jelly and the wood was slick with dampness. I slipped and fell back onto the wet grass, winded. I scrambled backward on my hands and feet until my back hit the fence again. I looked up. The figure had stopped about 10 feet away, silhouetted by the faint moonlight. He wasn't running anymore. He didn't need to. I was cornered. As my eyes adjusted to the moonlight, I saw him clearly for the first time. He was tall, dressed entirely in black, but it was his face that stopped my heart. He was wearing a plain, featureless white mask, like a blank canvas where a human face should be. It was more terrifying than any monster. It was an emptiness. He stood there, staring down at me, his chest heaving slightly from a chase. "You're fast," he said, his voice muffled slightly by the mask. "But you never really checked the house, did you? I was watching you through the vents. I listened to you singing in the shower. I've been your roommate for 3 days, waiting for your parents to leave." The realization hit me with sickening force. The noises, the feeling of being watched. He had been there the whole time. "Please," I begged, my voice pathetic croak. "Just let me go." He took a step toward me, tilting his head. "Now, why would I do that when we're just getting started?" He reached for me. I squeezed my eyes shut, waiting for the end. But then, a blinding white light flooded the backyard. The neighbor's finicky motion sensor floodlight had finally triggered. The sudden shift from darkness to searing light was disorienting. The intruder hissed in pain and surprise, throwing his arm up to shield his masked eyes from the glare. It was the split second I needed. Screaming with effort, I ignored the splinters and launched myself at the fence again. I kicked wildly against the wood, adrenaline giving me the strength I lacked before. I hauled myself up and over the top just as I heard him recover and lunge. His fingertips grazed my sneaker as I tumbled over the other side, landing hard in Mrs. Higgins' flower beds. I didn't stop. I scrambled up and pounded on her back door, screaming for help until lights flicked on inside. The next hour was a chaotic blur of flashing red and blue lights, static-filled police radios, and concerned neighbors in bathrobes. My parents arrived in record time, their faces pale with terror as they crushed me in hugs. I sat on the back of an ambulance, wrapped in a scratchy wool blanket, shivering despite the heat, repeating my story to grim-faced officers. They didn't catch him. By the time the first patrol car screeched onto our street, the intruder had vanished over the back fences and into the night. But what they found inside the house was worse than not finding him at all. In the small, unfinished crawl space behind the furnace in the basement, a spot I never checked, they found a sleeping bag, empty food wrappers from our pantry, and a foul-smelling bucket. He really had been living there. The noises, the breathing I had heard, it wasn't the house settling. It was him, existing in the spaces between our walls, waiting for his moment. We never spent another night in that house. My parents put on the market the next day, and we stayed in a hotel until we moved into a brightly lit apartment in the city on the 10th floor with a doorman and neighbors on every side. I know I'm safe now. Logically, I know that. But I don't stay home alone anymore. And sometimes, when the city noise dies down late at night and the apartment gets too quiet, I find myself holding my breath, straining my ears in the dark, listening for that slow, steady rhythm right behind me. I survive the night, but the silence never feels truly empty anymore.